Before piecing this video together, I kept asking myself what story I wanted to tell. Is it about the Scottish people or the landscapes and nature that I want to share? Over time, I realized you can't really separate the two. Scotland is where people, culture, and nature collide. Something I am very passionate about. I recently spent a month in Scotland exploring the Highlands, Isle of Skye, castles, snowboarding with new friends, searching for Highland cows, and making myself at home in Glasgow and Edinburgh. To start this trip, I picked up a van from a Roadsurfer location based in Edinburgh. I knew that I would want some freedom during the first half of this trip to roam freely, so having a van that had a kitchen, shower, bed, and dining area were extremely important to me. I live in a van back in the US and have rented vans in other countries, and I genuinely believe that renting a van for a portion of a trip is the best way to really explore a new country. Roadsurfer has over 100 camper van and RV locations across 16 countries, so if you're interested in renting one for your next trip, I've included all information along with a discount code in the description of this video. The pickup process was extremely easy, plus it came stocked with bedding and kitchenware that I would need to basically function on this trip. After unpacking all of my things, I was on the road, on the left-hand side of the road to be exact. One of the first things I do when I pick up a van is fill my water tank and get groceries. The apps I used in Scotland to find water fill-up, camp spots, laundry, and other van-related things are Park for Night, iOverlander, and I joined a local van life Facebook group. I wanted to do this trip a bit counterclockwise, so my first big stop was Glasgow. My goal coming here was less about work as a creator and more about living in the moment, so I did not film much initially. One of my approaches to travel is really familiarizing myself with an area, so I established myself with a gym, found local favorite coffee shops, went to the touristy spots, and made some friends. Glasgow stood out to me as one of the most creatively inspiring places I have ever been. Every person I talked to was either an actor, author, director, filmmaking community founder, or in some sort of creative space. There also seemed to be some sort of art show every single day. I was completely attracted to what felt like the desire to center life over work, which is such a stark contrast to the United States where work is such a priority. Life just felt slower here and I felt so inspired. Anyway, what sold me on booking a trip to Scotland was for the plot, and by plot, I mean being able to say I went snowboarding in the Highlands. Despite some overcast, slushy conditions and T-bars, this actually became one of my favorite snowboarding experiences. I am including all of the details in the description so you can experience it too. After leaving Glen Coe, I decided to make my way to an incredible castle, but not before coming across another castle on the way and encountering my first Highland cows. From the roadside parking area, there is a short 5 to 10 minute walk that is less than a mile to one of the most photographed castles in Scotland. I didn't even know about this castle, but I saw it from the road and decided to go explore. This is Kilchurn Castle. On your walk in, you'll see a donation option. I do encourage this if you can. I didn't have any cash on me, so I couldn't, but I do recommend if you have cash to donate. On your walk to the castle, you'll have an opportunity to hang out with some Highland cows, and I know there are people who come to Scotland just to see them. While it's obvious to some, I should mention not to touch them. Kilchurn Castle was built in the mid-1400s, but later abandoned after being damaged by lightning in the 1700s. It's beautifully situated right on the water, and while you cannot go inside, you can walk around and get little glimpses. This was such a lovely, unexpected stop before driving on some crazy, narrow, winding roads at night. There were many times that I wondered if my van was too wide for this one vehicle road, only to have to figure out how to let oncoming traffic pass with very few pull-offs. I'd say it was worth it to get to explore one of the most incredible castles. Enjoy. You'll notice that I did not list the name of this castle on screen. This was intentional because when I arrived on location, I actually discovered that you can't simply show up and visit this castle like most others. Duntrune Castle is one of Scotland's oldest continuously inhabited castles, dating back to the 12th century, originally built by Clan MacDougall and later taken over by Clan Campbell. It is still privately owned and lived in today, and while they do seasonal tours of the garden, they also allow people to book a stay at one of their 4 on-site cottages. But it is not technically open to the public. I called them when I arrived and saw a private property do not enter sign, but I saw on their website you could book a private tour. They were so kind to let me come tour the property by myself with permission to film and their consent for me to share on social media. But they don't want people showing up and ruining the property or mass promoting it to preserve the intimate experience of staying here and because it's their home. I could see a breakdown in the road conditions as I arrived, so I want to highlight the donation box available to contribute to the upkeep of this incredible historical property. They gave me permission to freely roam the gardens, which I thought was such an intimate experience. I did visit during winter, so I'm hoping this is a polite way of saying that the gardens were taking a nap, but out of season they are absolutely bursting with life. I did enjoy it though because there's something about the winter silence, cold air, and a slightly eerie off-season mood that made the history feel closer. I really loved connecting with the owner and this incredible property. I cannot say enough about it. I would absolutely book a stay here whenever I come back to Scotland. As I drove from Duntrune Castle toward Isle of Skye, I made a couple of stops in Oban and Glenfinnan Viaduct where some scenes from Harry Potter were filmed. I made many observations about the town's land and people. The landscape truly shaped identity, from the Highlands where mountains, glens, and remote coastlines naturally created isolated communities. I learned that this isolation helped preserve the Scottish Gaelic language, clan systems, and traditions tied to land and survival. In contrast, the lowlands developed more agriculture and trade due to flatter and more accessible land. Scotland also has some of the most unique land access rights in the world through the Land Reform Act, which allows you to legally roam most of the land, aiming to encourage hiking, wild camping, and outdoor culture. This is to emphasize the national belief that nature is for everyone, not owned by a few. As I spoke with people along my travels, I could see and hear so much pride in being from Scotland, but not in the way of having a big ego or something that might be a turnoff. There was a present humility in Scottish pride. No waving flags on the back of big lifted trucks, sorry guys, but many open conversations where joy was obvious in the way they spoke about Scotland. It was almost impossible to ignore the stillness and peace the air offered, completely unrushed. Maybe it was my intention behind the trip, and though I was still working, I had more awareness around putting my phone down, observing and absorbing. Even as I write this script and sort through footage, I can remember the smells, the smiles of strangers, the taste of the food, the headache from jet lag, the coffee that burnt my tongue, and the looming clouds that threatened my adventures.
Put your lips on mine. I love it when we hide in the pale blue sky. round. 'Cause what goes up must always come back down. But I'll be safe in your arms, like the light in the day never part. I'm looking down the line, with you by my side I'll be fine. Turning round. 'Cause what goes up must always come back down. But I'll be safe in your arms, like the light in the day never part. I'm looking down the line, with you by my side I'll be fine. Yeah, I'll be fine. I'll be fine. Yeah, I'll be fine.
The drive to Isle of Skye reminded me of the drive I did last summer on the Dalton Highway to the northernmost road-accessible town in the US, beginning in Anchorage and ending in Dead Horse, Alaska. However, the road to Skye was paved and in much better condition. The landscapes were rolling hills, uniquely shaped mountains, and the points of Old Man of Store. There were some bucket list hikes I really wanted to do, but it was so rainy and windy that I opted for slowness here, where I stopped for views and to read a book against the landscape while a worm moved between my feet. It's silly to mention the worm, but I distinctly remember looking down and it put a smile on my face to notice something so small against mountains so big that I could notice something I might usually miss in the busyness and monotony of day-to-day life back in the US. While it was a brief visit and not exactly what I was hoping for, the drive and short time I spent in Skye was one of my favorite parts of this trip before making my way back down to Glen Coe. Okay, so this is the funniest thing that happened out of my entire month-long trip in Scotland. The guy sitting across from me is Greg. He is a Scotland-based content creator who I had planned to go backpacking with, where we were supposed to wake up around 4 a.m. After a couple of hours of chatting, I had gone to bed and he went to his car to car camp. Suddenly, I got a knock on my van door in the middle of the night to find out he had locked himself out of his car in his underwear in freezing cold temps. We were up for a couple of hours using the one bar of service I had to try and contact someone to help him get into his car. I think they arrived around 1 a.m., but he had to sleep in my van until they got there. He was so embarrassed, but it just added to the adventure, and I reassured him that it wasn't a big deal and these things happen. Needless to say, we did not get up and go backpacking. Instead, we drove around Glen Coe, chatted, and got to explore before stopping at the King House restaurant for fish and chips, which was my favorite dish. After our brief exploration, I spent a couple more days in the area and went on a solo hike for a breakfast view. I hope you enjoy these views of Glen Coe as much as I did. knew it, my solo van trip came to an end and it was time to return my van. But my trip didn't end here. I decided to extend and rent a flat in Edinburgh. The Outlander fans are gonna love this. On my way, I stopped at Doune Castle, better known as Castle Leoch from Outlander. When you arrive at the castle, you get a self-guided audiobook that teaches you the history of the castle as you explore each room. Some locations have Sam Heughan narrating, which I thought was a sweet touch to the tour. I love history, so I could have spent more time here, but I was in a bit of a hurry. The Roadsurfer rental drop-off was just as simple as the pickup. I booked an Uber, and with 2 massive suitcases, I checked into my flat, which, by the way, had 3 flights of stairs to get to. It was pretty comical to assume there would be an elevator, which there wasn't, so I had to carry the suitcases, a backpack, and personal bag all the way up. But it was worth it for this cozy and perfectly located flat in Bruntsfield. This location was perfect because it was close enough to walk to main attractions, but far enough away to be outside the busyness of the touristy spots. One of the very first things I did in Edinburgh was book a Harry Potter tour. I'm going to give away my age here, but I have been a Harry Potter fan since I was a kid, and it was really cool to walk the streets that inspired so much of the series. I was really surprised to learn that J.K. Rowling drew inspiration for character names like Thomas Riddle, William McGonagall, and Elizabeth Moody from Greyfriars Kirkyard, which is a cemetery. I also think that Bobby, a fiercely loyal dog who is buried at Greyfriars, inspired the character of Dobby in the Harry Potter series. Look him up if you have time or are interested in learning about the lore. I walked along the schools and stores that inspired other elements of the books and was in awe of the mind that drew inspiration in such a creative way. I was so excited about this tour, but about halfway through, I suddenly became very feverish and had to depart the tour. I popped into the closest shop and found soup and bread to warm up and hopefully feel better before my 30-minute walk back. I was honestly down bad for a couple of days, and truthfully, I mostly enjoyed exploring Edinburgh by foot, so come along with me on a walk around one of the most beautiful cities in Scotland. There are so many other things I wish I could share with you. From making friends, dinners with strangers I met on a train, a date I went on with a Royal Navy officer, driving 7 hours only to realize I couldn't put my van on a ferry, late night dancing and cocktail bars, and every little moment from this trip. There is simply not enough time or words to describe how I feel as I reflect on this time of my life. While finding a balance between filming and truly experiencing, I hope I struck a medium of storytelling that inspires you to explore Scotland. Scotland by van or foot.